So in this video, we'll be showing you clips from 5 different videos from our pre-scene analysis pack. And the first clip is from the pre-scene analysis series. It's vital that you fully analyze your pre-scene, and this requires a detailed examination of the case study, ensuring that every section is fully understood. So our pre-scene analysis video provides a page-by-page analysis of every section of the pre-scene, and it ensures you don't miss anything important, and it helps you to build a comprehensive understanding of the material. And this is vital if you're going to gain high marks in the exam. So in this clip, we've taken a section from our pre-scene analysis video series.
Okay, so the introduction, let's get going. Flathall is a quoted company that owns and operates 174 residential buildings which are located in towns and cities in its home country of Thailand. These buildings are subdivided into flats which are rented to full-time students in nearby colleges and universities. So okay, this is just the introductory paragraph, but let's set a precedent for what we're going to be doing as we go through this or these series of videos. So straight away we can see a couple of issues raising themselves from this information. So we can see that Flathall is a quoted company. So already we mentioned F2 and long-term finance in the previous section. So already we're starting to think about its access to equity, etc. That might be one way it could finance any operations and expansion. And then the second element, the second sentence I've highlighted about the buildings being subdivided into flats which are rented to full-time students. Well, okay, we're seeing now the customer segment that Flathall is targeting, which is of course full-time students. Now, when we're thinking about the CIMA business model from E2, well, in the value delivery section, that's the element of the business model where we're looking at what is being delivered to the customer segment. And we now know that's that segment of the business model for CIMA already, and we're only in 2 sentences in. You can see how much information we can draw out. Okay, so let's continue. Thailand's currency is in the Thailand dollars. Thailandian company law requires companies to prepare their financial statements in accordance with IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. So here again, this is all these elements are things we're going to come to in greater detail further along in this video. But what we're seeing already is the fact that financial statements having to comply with IFRS is going to impact how revenue is recognized from contracts with the customers, such as student rental agreements, etc. So, and also the currency being in the Thailand dollars. Well, that's important for us to remember when we're writing our answers, but also, of course, there might be elements further along when we're dealing with foreign students. We've got to think about currency risk as well. So you are a financial manager. Here we go back to the financial role that we've already discussed in the previous page. You're a financial manager at Flathall's head office. Your primary responsibilities are associated with management accounting, which we've already highlighted. You report to Susanna Leong, and the senior financial manager, and she reports directly to the finance director. Now we're going to come to the hierarchy of the board later on and the board structure, but you can see we're already putting into place, we can spot there's a hierarchical reporting structure. So we're suspecting we've got an organizational leadership which aligns with strategic goals and management efficiency. So you can see there, we've picked out a lot already. We can see how elements are relating back to the syllabus and how you're going to have to kind of think about all the 3 syllabi to get good answers in this pre-C. So that's the introduction. What we're going to do is scroll down now to look at the wider industry, because of course Flathall provides accommodation for university and college students. So it's important for us to understand how the institution system works, or the university system or post-education system works in Thailand. Okay, so Thailand has a well-developed higher education system, 215 colleges and universities, also known as institutions, and I'll refer to them as institutions throughout this video if I haven't already, which provide 3-year courses leading to undergraduate degrees. So the student leaves school with the relevant qualifications, then they can apply to college or university, and these courses seem as a rule to last 3 years. Once the student has completed their examinations associated with the courses, then they receive their degrees. Good to see there is a healthy demand for places at these institutions. So we've got lots of institutions throughout the country, and there's a healthy demand for them. So what we can get from here, or an idea already, is that Flathall is operating in a market that's got a strong demand for higher education. Now that's really important to understand the company's business model, because of course they are targeting students. So if there's lots of institutions and there's a healthy demand for places, well, it seems like Flathall is in a good sector. A large proportion of Thailandians complete a college or university qualification after leaving school. So that's really good to know as well. A large proportion of the nation. The Thailandian government subsidizes course fees, and full-time students can apply for financial support in the form of student loans that don't have to be repaid until after graduation. So what we can see here is that Thailandians have access to subsidies and loans. They in turn impact their ability to afford accommodation. Now, presumably because they can receive these subsidies, it means they are going to be more likely to be able to afford accommodation. So as part of cost planning, Flathall can think, well, how are these financial aids going to actually affect students' housing decisions? Of course, if they're getting really healthy subsidies, for example, Flathall could think, well, we can offer more premium accommodation. We know, because students are getting these subsidies, that they can afford this premium accommodation. So you can see this knowledge is really going to affect Flathall's pricing strategy as well as their revenue forecasts. Thailand has a strong international reputation for further and higher education, and the country attracts, a large number of overseas students who believe they're going to benefit from studying at a Thailandian university. So that's another really promising element for Flathall to be aware of, because obviously the education system is attracting overseas students. Now, what does that mean for Flathall? Well, we've seen, haven't we, that the target group are students, but actually now maybe that customer base is slightly more diverse than we were first anticipating, because these are going to be students from all over the world. And of course, because they're coming from all over the world, there is that point I made earlier when we looked at the Thailandian dollar. There could be foreign currency considerations if the students are paying from abroad rather than paying in the Thailandian home currency. Okay, let's drop down a bit to see the charts. So we can see the number of full-time students is rising from just over 2.5 million, just under 2.5 million to just over 2.5 million. So we started in 2017, 2018 and finishing in 2022, 2023. So steady growth in the millions of full-time students in Thailandia. And you can see the overseas students, there's a slight growth, but it's staying pretty steady around 600,000 for the last 4 or 5 years or so. So the market is dominated by home students, that's for sure. But there are the foreign students we've already mentioned. So in the academic year 2022-2023, as we've already noted, there's 2.1 million home students and then there's 600,000 overseas students. Institutions are keen to fill all available spaces, and that's because Thailand's government subsidises places for home students. So remember, we've got 2.1 million home students. So institutions are going to receive student fees, so students are paying the institutions, and they're going to receive government subsidies. So they get funded in two different ways, from students and from the government, and that totals 8,000 Thailandian dollars every year. So every home student is paying $8,000 a year to their institution for home students, impacting their accommodation choices. So it's really important that Flathall understands these economic factors, because it's going to be vital for them in effective cost planning and pricing strategy. So for example, let's imagine a worst case scenario. Let's imagine that the government withdraws all funding, all subsidies. Well, obviously then students aren't going to go to their universities much, and if they do go, they're probably more likely to stay at home whilst they study, and of course they're going to have severe ramifications for Flathall. Now on a more gradual level, knowing how the institutions are funded, how students fund their accommodation is really important for them with their cost planning. Okay.
Next up, we've got a clip from our strategic analysis. It's extremely important that you have the ability to identify how the pre-scene relates to key models and theory, and the examiners will expect students to demonstrate a good understanding of the models and theories and make the appropriate links to the case study during the exam. It can be hard to fully analyze a company using models you've only recently learned and be confident that you've got it right. So our strategic analysis has done that hard work for you. So in this clip, we're going to take a look at our strategic analysis video.
So that being said, let's get going with the mission. So the mission is all about setting up the purpose of the organization. Why does the organization exist? Who does it exist for? And what does the organization hope to achieve in the long term? Now, the specific mission statement of Flathall isn't directly quoted in the case study, but I think we can infer that Flathall's mission revolves around providing high quality, strategically located and well-maintained student accommodation. Now, the mission would also probably emphasize enhancing the student living experience through modern, secure and conducive living environments as well, because Flathall's all about making a premium offering so it can charge the premium prices and of course attract students to its properties. The next element of this mission is the strategy, and I think what we could safely say is that Flathall, from the case study, appears to be focusing on expanding its portfolio of PBSA properties and keeping them modern and appealing, because we know that they constantly redecorate every year, so they're always looking fresh. They're not allowed to become like the stereotypical student properties. And they also offer kind of the amenities that cater to contemporary student needs, such as the fast Wi-Fi and communal living spaces. Now, another element of the mission are its values. So this is what the organization stands for. So kind of quality or value for money or innovation, for example. Now, as I've already mentioned, I think one of the values of Flathall would be the fact it offers premium accommodation for its students. And by that I mean the spaces are really well designed. They're student designed as well, so they're designed specifically for the student needs. They're given everything that they could want. But another key part of their values is the compliance and security. So one of the things that kept repeating in the case study was the company making sure the properties were very secure, the reception was staffed 24/7, there were visitor management policies, so students could feel really safe in the accommodation, perhaps in their first time away from home, or even perhaps their first time staying in town and moving in from another country. And another part of this would be compliance as well. It's values. It has to be compliant with local regulations. Another feature we saw from the case study was that students were allowed in the rooms, which means that in fact the properties are pretty much vacant during the summer holidays when the students leave the properties. So one of the values is being really compliant with the organisations, because if they weren't, they just wouldn't be allowed to exist. Okay. And then the final element of this mission section are the policies. And these are the policies that ensure people act according to the defined values, strategies, and purpose. So we've already seen that there's a focus on security, and the policies for the security are, as we saw in the case study, related to visitor management, and that keeps students safe, but it also means that the organisation is abiding by city planning regulations. And this shows that Flathall is committed to creating safe and regulated environments for its student residents. And a second one that I mentioned was the maintenance and upkeep. So we know that it wants to be a premium offering. Well, one of the policies to get to that premium standards is making sure there's continuous maintenance and periodic redecoration of the properties, making sure the properties are attractive, making sure they are functional, and this in turn reinforces Flathall's dedication to quality and student satisfaction. Okay, so there we go. There's a quick introduction where hopefully we've kind of started to think about a few themes that are really important to Flathall. What we're going to move over to now is the balanced scorecard. And as I'm sure you're aware, the balanced scorecard is a strategic planning and management system that's used by organisations to align their business activities with the vision and strategy of the organisation, to improve internal and external communications and monitor organisational performance against strategic goals. So it transcends traditional financial metrics by incorporating non-financial aspects that are crucial for a company's success. Now, so you can see the 4 perspectives in front of you, and these perspectives include different measures that kind of help make sure the organisation is on course. So the financial perspective includes measures that indicate whether the company's strategy, implementation and execution, are contributing to bottom line improvements. We've got the learning and growth perspective next to it, and these are metrics tracking the organization's improvement and creation of value through learning and innovation. We've got the internal perspective, and this is a group of measures that focus on the internal operational goals and the benchmarks to achieve them. And we've got the customer perspective, and these are metrics related to customer satisfaction, retention, and market share in the target segments. So let's run through a few of the ideas that I've had for these perspectives. So I've got a few objectives written down in each of these perspectives. So let's take the financial perspective first. And the first objective we'd have in this financial perspective is to increase profitability and to sustain growth. I think that's a pretty good objective. Now, of course, within that, there'll be a group of measures. So you might look at revenue growth, the gross profit margin, the operating profit margin, for example, and that would let you know how you are doing against those objectives. Then alongside those objectives, you might have targets where you want to hit this growth rate and revenue, maintain and improve profit margins. And then, of course, you might have the initiatives in order to help you hit those targets. So a couple of more pertinent objectives that I've included in the balanced scorecard are to reduce the operational costs. So that would be things like looking at the cost per unit of accommodation, the energy costs going into the PBSAs, as well as the things like the maintenance costs. And then the final objective, and of course these aren't kind of conclusive list of objectives. These are just some ideas. Well, another good financial perspective is to, well, improve investment returns. So the measures for those may be return on investment for new properties or cash flow from operations. And of course, you can easily set up targets from those measures. And then, of course, the initiatives can stem from those. In the learning perspective, a couple of innovations. I've got foster innovation and continuous improvement. So we might measure this by looking at how many employee training hours there are or any new services we've launched. Another objective I've got is to cultivate leadership and management skills. So here we might look at measures of leadership training completion rates and employee satisfaction scores. And then in the internal perspectives, I've got 3 more objectives. And the first is to streamline operations for efficiency and quality. So there you might have measures like time to complete maintenance requests. So for example, if the student's got a complaint, how long does that take from complaint to the, I don't know, whatever it was, the radiator falling off the wall being put back on again, or the broken pane of glass being repaired? How long does that take? Or perhaps it's looking at the efficiency of booking and management processes. The second one was to improve the onboarding or improve the property onboarding processes. So this would be measurements like time to market for new properties or the efficiency of the furnishing and the setup processes. And maybe you've got a target then to reduce the onboarding time by 30%. That means you're going to get people in quicker. It means you're going to be getting rent quicker. And the final objective I've got there is to enhance environmental sustainability. Now, kind of the environment, sustainability are things we're seeing a lot more in the case study. It's something we've mentioned as we've gone along in the pre-scene videos. What does that mean for the organisation in terms of environmental sustainability? So we can have an objective in the internal processes perspective. One of the measures could be a reduction in the carbon footprint or the percentage of renewable energy used. And of course, we get some targets for that. Maybe we want to reduce carbon emissions by 20%, or perhaps we want to make sure that 50% of our energy comes from renewable sources. And then finally, we've got our customer perspective. So one of the objectives in the customer perspective may be to enhance student satisfaction and loyalty. So of course, we need to measure that by looking at student satisfaction scores, perhaps retention rates, perhaps occupancy rates, perhaps how many people return back to the accommodation and re-rent their room. And of course, you'd be trying to attain high satisfaction scores. Another objective could be to increase the market penetration amongst international students. We saw how valuable international students were to institutions, and maybe that could be a growth area for Flathall. So perhaps then you use the measures to see, well, how much of our percentage of students is made up from international students? How satisfied are they? And then you get your target coming from them going, okay, we want to increase our international student rate by about 20%. And of course, your initiatives come from that. And the final objective I've got in the balanced scorecard is to enhance digital engagement. So perhaps you want to get people online looking at Flathall more. Maybe you measure that by looking at the website traffic or the amount of app downloads you've had or the amount of online bookings you take. And then perhaps you think, well, I want to double this online engagement. And so you look at ways to do that from your initiative. So there we go. There's a balanced scorecard. And that's to make sure that you're not just focusing on the finance. You're not just focusing on the bottom line. You're aware that the organization, well, you're viewing it more holistically, I suppose is the way to say it.
We're casting the net a little bit wider now with a look at the wider industry in which the pre-scene company operates with our industry analysis video. It is critical to demonstrate to the examiner that you have fully understood the pre-scene industry as a key element to gaining extra high marks in your case study exam. Researching the industry can be a laborious process, especially when you're not sure which information is useful and which isn't. And our team has spent hours doing this research for you, finding the information that will help you to achieve a wider perspective of the industry and build a deeper knowledge in preparation for your exam. So in this next clip, we'll be taking a look at our industry analysis video.
So, Chapter 2, an introduction to university accommodation industry. Right, so let's just kind of get ourselves familiar with what we're talking about here. This image is kind of a fairly typical student accommodation block. It's basically a place where students come and can live while they study. Now, you might have some kind of preconceptions about the grottiness and the not so favourable living conditions in a place like this, but luckily for our sakes we don't really have to think about that at all. We are just working as a financial officer within a company that provides student accommodation. I think the really key takeaway from this section is just how big the industry is. So if we look at this, £85.8 billion in 2023. That's just for the UK, and a projected growth to 104 billion by 2028. This is a huge industry, a really huge industry, and a big part of the UK economy and a lot of different economies. So it's really important to think about the scope of what we're talking about here. Now, let's go on to a bit of historical context. So this is unlikely to come up really kind of relevantly in your exam, but it's really good to have a kind of background knowledge of the industry and to know where things have come from and where they're going. So let's jump in. So early on, the student accommodation industry was quite a different beast than we see today. We can see the need for student accommodation first starting in 12th and 13th century Europe, when big universities full stop, began to spring up. We've got places like Oxford, which I'm sure you've heard of, and then in Italy, places like Bologna. These are kind of the first big two European universities. This accommodation was often just very basic. We're talking rooms above taverns, above shared houses, dormitories basically, with students living in close proximity. Not many amenities, so very simplistic. If we jump forward to the 19th and 20th centuries, we start to see a rise of university-owned halls of residence. So those are halls that are directly attached to the university rather than privately rented. This is kind of as universities become a bigger deal in society and a bigger industry, I suppose. And then if we jump to our next section, this is where the big change starts happening, really, is the post-war era. So after the war, a lot more people decided that going to university was going to improve their life chances, and also social mobility meant that a lot of students could go to university. A lot more people could attempt to. So this is a real period of industry growth, where we saw the construction of a lot of the tower blocks that you'll see today on university campuses. So yeah, a real period of growth. Now, if we move to today, we can say we are living in the maturity phase of the industry. We'll get onto exactly what that means in just a minute, but the student accommodation sector has transformed into a dynamic and sophisticated sector. There is a lot of different housing options, there's lots of different amenities, so we've got things like gyms, cinemas, study lounges. All of those things sound quite nice, don't they? A home cinema, pretty decent. And this development really comes from the latest development in the industry, which is this shift towards purpose-built student accommodation. So you'll often hear me and other people refer to that as PBSA, but that's just an acronym for purpose-built student accommodation. This is, as we've said, the latest development, and it's becoming increasingly popular, especially with overseas students. I'm going to get all into the importance of overseas students later, don't you worry. So yeah, we're in a situation where investment has skyrocketed, we're looking at a global industry, and we're looking at a quite saturated market with lots of different competitors looking to provide the best experiences and draw in the most number of students. Okay, so now let's move on to the industry life cycle. So we've had a nice brief bit of history, but let's have a quick scan over some of these phases. Now, I think the introduction phase we can quite neatly tie to the start of universities. The growth phase, as we said, was around the post-war period when we saw a boom in students coming, but this is probably the most relevant because it's the phase we're in right now, and that's the maturity phase. So yeah, end of the 20th century and start of the 21st, we see the rise of the maturity phase of the industry. And the things that are important now are competition and brand differentiation. So the industry is established, and now we've got established providers competing with one another. Now, as you'll know from your study of industry life cycles, what often happens in the maturity phase or after the maturity phase is a decline in the industry. Well, I think we can safely say that for the student accommodation industry, and especially for the purpose-built student accommodation industry, this is not the case. Far from stagnation or decline, we can see a 2023 study from Cushman and Wakefield find that demand is at an all-time high. A record number of over 2.2 million students signed on to go to university in 2023, and those are obviously the key customers for student accommodation, and so a growth in them is only going to be good. In fact, at the moment, we're in a situation where supply is unable to keep up with demand. So there's a lot of space for growth, but also some issues that student accommodation providers need to tackle so that they can adequately face supply. But it's a good place to be in. Now let's apply that to Flathall and the pre-scene. So Flathall, founded in 1994, and that's during that post-war era of growth, really, the kind of post-war boom. And this completely makes sense given the history of the company. So we're told that Flathall opened its first block of flats in 1995, and now it owns 174 buildings all across the nation and accommodates 78,000 students. So that's a pretty impressive growth, and we can attribute that to the market, which has been growing for the entirety of the modern era. Now, Flathall is specifically a PBSA provider, so that's that purpose-built student accommodation. This is a relatively new development, as we've discussed, and as such, Flathall should expect growth to continue in the coming years, as it's in a very good position. And this, as we're going to get into even more, but I'm going to hint at again, is because of international students. They're the kind of big growing part of the market, and they tend to be quite attracted to PBSAs. I think we can also see that Flathall's position as a specifically PBSA provider shows us the diversification and sophistication of the market. We can see that student accommodation is trying to meet students' needs with the amenities of high-speed internet and security services that Flathall offer and that are typical to PBSA providers. Okay, so with that done, let's move on to service. Now, as I've hinted at here, you might be thinking that, how complicated can all this sort of stuff be? It's just a student renting a room. Well, no, it's not. There's a lot of services available and a lot of different ways that companies try to stand out from their competitors in their offerings towards students. As I've said here, companies are looking for ways to draw these students in. So if we move on to some of these services that are offered and pick out some of the key ones, first one here is going to be accommodation options. So a big part of purpose-built student accommodation, PBSAs, is that they offer different specialities for different types of students. We've got options like ensuite rooms with private bathrooms, studio apartments where they're all for one student, and then also your classic shared apartments that encourage a kind of communal experience. Another thing that's quite important is the fact that the rental agreements are typically all bundled in with essential utilities, so students don't have to worry about managing their water, electricity or heating bills or even internet bills. That is all provided for by PBSAs. Another key feature is the security and safety features that are offered services in PBSAs. So security is quite a big deal. There's a number of measures in place to ensure student safety and also to make sure students feel like they're safe and like they're being made secure. So we've got access being controlled by keycards or fobs, we've got CCTV surveillance, and even some with 24/7 on-site security personnel. There's also, on the kind of, slightly more boring regulation side of things, we see a strict adherence to the regulations of the nation, especially in terms of things like fire protocol. So we've got fire extinguishers, yabba, fire escape plans, but all important stuff. Academic support, just to quickly nip into this, a lot of the time this will involve kind of dedicated support facilities, which we'll often see in the style of support rooms or even sometimes counsellors who can help with academic problems. So moving on, we've got social and community engagement. This is another important feature that's offered by PBSAs because people don't just go to university to study. Also a big part of it is the social side of things. So this is facilitated with things like comfortable seating, entertainment systems and recreational facilities so that students have a nice environment to socialise in. And I think those are all the key points we're going to go over for this short look at the services, but I would really encourage you to go and have a look at some of the other ones. Now let's move on to direct competitors for a company like Flathall. We're going to take these from the UK, and for the course of this whole guide, we're probably going to focus mostly on the UK, just because there are some real similarities between the UK and Thailand, which is the country we hear about in the pre-scene. These similarities are really spelt out in the whole document, but essentially it's the fact that they both draw in students from other countries, and they're both well known for their higher education offerings and have quite a similar student accommodation industry. So, two key ones to think about here. This one here, Unite Students, we're going to go into a lot more detail on later. They are the UK's biggest provider, operating in 23 different cities and housing, I think it's around 70,000 students. And then this is another big one here, CRM Students. Very similar setup. They are a nationwide provider and provide all the different property types and amenities you might expect for a PBSA. There are also companies like Homes for Students, and also one we'll come on to later, which isn't really a competitor but is definitely growing, companies like Nido Students, which are more focused on this kind of more boutique offering, so modern, well-furnished accommodation, which are really focused on the living experience being exceptionally pleasant. Right, now let's apply that to the pre-scene. So, security-wise, Flathall are doing pretty good. It's in line with what we expect from PBSAs. We're told in the pre-scene that access is restricted by keycards, and we're also told that there is a team of concierges who provide customer support, but also security is one of their main objectives. So that is good in terms of security. We're also told that Flathall focuses on the needs of convenience and comfort. So there's amenities like laundry facilities offered and cleaners who keep kind of clean, well-kept premises. This is again very much in line with the sector's efforts to provide these essential services and make a home-like environment for their students, give them something extra that they might not get in their private rented accommodation. Overall, though, I think we can say that Flathall doesn't really exceed the general expectation of PBSAs. It really kind of provides what you'd expect and not much extra. But this is not necessarily a problem. So PBSAs are already a premium service in the market when compared to private student rentals or even university-owned halls. And so long as Flathall's facilities are not noticeably lower than their competitors, they are going to be able to compete via promotion and company perception. Now, this company perception is great for Flathall because we know in the pre-scene that they have a positive brand image and an extensive marketing plan that clearly shows that they're ready to compete based off of that aspect. Okay, so that's services, and now let's move on to customers and marketing, which is chapter 3.
The next clip is taken from one of our most popular videos, the Top 10 Issues. The Top 10 Issues video identifies the 10 most likely issues to appear in the exam based on our expertise and experience in this area. And our expert gives guidance on how to deal with the issues in your answers, provides advice on which models to use, and key points that you should raise. Based on our experience of analysing CIMA case studies for over 10 years, our predictions have been extremely accurate in previous exams, with around 70 to 80% of topics in the real exams being covered in our top 10 lists. So take a look now at this clip from our top 10 issues video.
So let's get going. And we'll start with sustainability and CSR. And of course, we're going to first start by telling you why we've chosen it. And there's in fact a couple of reasons why I selected this. Well, firstly, the issue itself is just really important now. Social and environmental factors are becoming far more important in everyday life. And for the PBSA sector, stakeholders, we're talking about the students, the parents, and the educational institutions, so really key stakeholders, as we saw in our Mendelos for Flathall, are beginning to increasingly prioritise sustainability and social responsibility. So by demonstrating a commitment to these areas, Flathall could really boost its reputation and perhaps gain a competitive advantage by saying to these stakeholders, well, look, this is the action we're taking. This is the amount of energy that comes from renewable sources, etc., etc. And the second reason why I've chosen this issue is because of regulatory compliance and risk mitigation. So we know there's a growing focus on sustainability. And of course, that doesn't just come from the stakeholders who want to stay at Flathall's accommodation. It also comes from other stakeholders, the regulatory bodies, because Flathall is going to need to make sure it aligns its operations with CSR principles in order to comply with legislation and mitigate potential risks associated with non-compliance or negative publicity. So that's the reason why I've chosen sustainability. That's one of the reasons why I think it could be an issue for you in your exam, just because it's an issue for everyone now, isn't it? In every sector, in every walk of life, environmentalism, sustainability is a really key thing. So what kind of issues are we likely to see? Well, I've got 3 up there, and the first one is the environmental impact of operations. So what we know is that Flathall make pretty big buildings, and the construction as well as the operation of these big PBSA buildings have significant environmental footprints. So we're talking about things such as energy consumption, waste management, and sustainable building practices requiring attention to improve sustainability. So one of the issues is how we're going to improve our sustainability. Secondly, the social impact and community relations. So the relationship between PBSA providers and local communities can be strained because of concerns about student behaviour, property prices, because of course, if PBSA are opening up these huge buildings in residential areas, for example, it could be something that drives down property prices because people think, well, actually, I don't want to live next to, 1,000 students. So properties aren't worth so much. And of course, that could upset the residents that are already there. And also, it can really impact local infrastructure because suddenly you're bringing in a load of people that are relying heavily on public transport, for example. So there is going to be significant causes for concerns for the community in these areas for them. So enhancing community engagement and contributing positively to local areas are going to be key CSR considerations. And the third likely issue I've got are ethical concerns and governance. So here we're looking at things such as ethical business practices, including fair treatment of employees, transparency in dealing with educational institutions, and responsible marketing to students are going to be really critical for maintaining trust and credibility. So there we go. There's some issues that come out of this important topic of sustainability. And these are where I think they most likely relate to Flathall. Now, because of that, here's some key points I think you should raise or maybe raised. And I've got 4 points here. And the first of those is developing a comprehensive CSR strategy. So crafting a CSR strategy that encompasses environmental sustainability, social impact, and ethical governance. And this strategy should be integrated into Flathall's overall business model and operations. Secondly, engaging stakeholders. So regularly engaging with key stakeholders, including students, educational institutions, local communities, and regulatory bodies in order to understand their concerns and expectations regarding CSR. And now this engagement can help shape Flathall's CSR initiatives and improve stakeholder relations. Thirdly, reporting and transparency. committing to transparency by reporting on CSR activities and their outcomes. Utilizing frameworks such as the Global Reporting Initiative can provide a structured approach to reporting and help communicate efforts and achievements in sustainability and social responsibility. And the last point, investing in sustainable technologies and practices. So by investing in energy efficient technologies, sustainable building materials and green initiatives with PBSA properties. Now these investments not only contribute to environmental sustainability, but can also lead to cost savings in the long term. So by addressing these areas, Flathall will be able to strengthen its position as a responsible and sustainable PSA provider, enhancing its appeal to environmentally and socially conscious students and stakeholders. So there we go. There's the key points to raise. And now I'm just going to put up some relevant theory quickly. So this is just whereabouts in the syllabus you'll be able to find the theories that relate to the things that I was just talking about. So obviously we've got sustainability reporting and integrated reporting from F2. This section covers principles and benefits of integrated reporting. This combines financial and non-financial data to provide a holistic view of a company's performance, including its approach to sustainability and social responsibility. Flathall could use these principles to communicate its CSR efforts and its outcomes to stakeholders. The second one is ethical considerations and public interest from P2. Now this includes the ethical implications of business decisions, emphasising the importance of considering the wider impacts on society and the environment. Flathall's approach to CSR has to align with ethical standards and contribute positively to public welfare. I've also got corporate social responsibility and ethics. This section explores the role of ethical leadership in fostering a culture of social responsibility within organisations, and includes strategies for embedding CSR into corporate governance and decision-making processes. So for Flathall, this could involve developing CSR policies which guide its operations and interactions with stakeholders. And then finally, stakeholder engagement, which is from E2. So here it's all about understanding and managing stakeholder expectations. Really important for CSR initiatives. You know, like we did our Mendelows in the previous video, working out, you know, what these different stakeholder groups need. Now, this area of the syllabus discusses techniques for engaging with different stakeholder groups, and that can help Flathall identify and address CSR-related concerns and expectations from students. Now, this is what you should be doing in your revision, is working through the Mendelows, thinking, okay, what do these stakeholder groups want? How are these stakeholder groups going to be impacted? How can we kind of mitigate these risks? Just so you're ready for anything like that in the exam. So by integrating all these theories and concepts into its strategy, you're going to be far more aware of how Flathall can develop and implement effective CSR practices which not only comply with regulatory requirements but also enhance its reputation, strengthen its stakeholder relationships and contribute to long-term sustainability. So there we go, that's our number one. That's the order of why we're doing it. So hopefully that all makes sense and you can see the strands of kind of the thread we're putting through from these issues and how we then relate it back to what you've learned in your syllabus. Okay, so our next topic is number 9. I should point out these aren't in order. Number 1 isn't more likely to appear than number 10. It's just the top 10 issues. So don't think we're dropping down like we would in an old-fashioned chart show. So number 9 is IFRS 15. And why is this chosen? Okay, so let's zoom into the basis of choice. Well, I've got 3 things here. The first is that it's an issue that has regularly started appearing in case study exams, so it's one that we know does come up. Secondly, it's easy to assess if the student knows the recognition steps and the criteria. And thirdly, we're relating it back to our pre-scene. And I've written the complexity of revenue recognition in the PBSA sector, because Flathall's revenue streams, including rental income, ancillary services and fees for additional amenities, may involve complex arrangements that necessitate careful consideration under IFRS 15. Now, this standard provides a framework for recognizing revenue in a manner that reflects the transfer of promised goods or services to customers. Okay, let's go and have a look at some likely issues that may arise from IFRS 15 revenue. The first is identification and separation of performance obligations. Determining whether components of Flathall's service offerings are distinct performance obligations under IFRS 15 can be challenging. Misinterpretation can lead to incorrect revenue recognition timing and amounts, affecting financial reporting accuracy. Secondly, we've got variable consideration and incentives. Flathall may offer discounts, rebates, or other incentives to students, which must be accurately estimated and accounted for under IFRS 15. Mismanagement can result in revenue misstatement and affect earnings volatility. And thirdly, customer contracts and modifications. Changes to student accommodation contracts, such as contract modifications or cancellations, must be carefully evaluated under IFRS 15. These changes could impact revenue recognition patterns and amounts recognised in the financial statements. So there's some likely issues and some key points to raise. Comprehensive review and documentation. So undertaking a thorough review of existing contracts and arrangements to ensure they comply with IFRS 15 requirements. Documenting the company's revenue recognition policies and procedures to make sure there's consistency and transparency in financial reporting. Training and awareness. So, providing comprehensive training for Flathall's finance and accounting teams on IFRS 15 requirements, focusing the recognition of performance obligations, transaction price determination, and revenue allocation. Regular updates on standard interpretations or amendments are crucial. And thirdly, system enhancements and controls. So, investing in accounting systems and software that can support the detailed tracking and reporting requirements of IFRS 15. Implementing robust internal controls to ensure accurate and timely revenue recognition and reporting. So by addressing these considerations, Flathall can ensure there's compliance with IFRS 15 and provide clear and accurate financial information to stakeholders and support strategic decision-making processes. And the relevant theory, we've got IFRS 15 revenue, 5 steps to revenue recognition, and principles and agents.
Our final clip is from our mini mock debrief video. We produce a range of mock exams for each sitting, and alongside each of those mocks is a video debrief. And in these debrief videos, our experienced tutor analyzes every question and takes you through a step-by-step guide on the best way to approach them. And by watching debrief videos, you'll learn to understand how to pick out all of the key information in the task and the requirements. You'll use that information to build an effective plan. Many students fail due to poor answer planning. And then that will help you to formulate an excellent answer. So in our sample video, the tutor will take you through question 1 of the mini mock.
So let's drop down a little bit and see the first question. Now, what you've got on screen, what you will see when you're in your exam, is you have questions divided up into tasks. And as you'll know, I'm sure you're aware anyway, that it's a very time-limited exam. Time is your enemy in this case study exam. So what we're focused on the whole time is how are you going to get your marks within the time frame. And you're going to have 4 tasks to complete in your MCS exam. And obviously this is task 1. And you'll see that we've got 45 minutes here. So you've got 45 minutes to get as many marks as you can for task 1. Because once those 45 minutes are up, there's no going back. You can't take 55 minutes from task 1 and drop that down to 35 minutes for task 2. That's it. So all our preparation, as you're going to see in this video, all our approach is focused on making sure you cover as much as you possibly can in those 45 minutes. And what we're going to do is look at techniques to make sure that you can do that. So what do we do when we get given a question? Well, the first thing you might do is you might think, well, okay, I'm going to start reading the question through. I'm a finance manager at Flathall, la-di-da-di-da. No. What we're doing is going straight down to see all 3 different subtasks. Now, there might be more, but as a rule, there's often more than one anyway. So what we've got here is subtask A, subtask B, and subtask C. And you can see they've all got a different weighting. So this is how many marks they are worth in the exam. So of course, our next calculation here is to work out the amount of time you should spend on them. Because you don't want to be spending 5 minutes on a question worth 48% of the marks and 40 minutes on a question worth 28% of the marks, because you want to maximize the amount of marks that you can get. So what we want to do first is get the time structure into place. We want to work out how long we should be spending on each question, including planning. So subtask A is 48%. So that's going to be worth about 12 marks. And out of the 45 minutes, you should be spending 22 minutes on this question. Subtask B is worth 24, so it's worth about 6 marks, and you should be spending about 11 minutes on this question. And then subtask C is worth slightly more. It's worth 28% of the mark, so it's worth 7 marks. So you're spending 1 more minute than the previous question. You're spending 12 minutes on this question. So the very first thing you're doing is going, okay, sorting myself out. Which question is most important to me? Which one is going to get all my focus? But you're still going to stick to your questions. You want to complete as much as you can, okay? Now, the next thing we're going to do, you might think we're going to go, straight up now, start reading through the content. No, that's not what we're going to do. We've got our subtask now. We know how much time we're spending. The clock is ticking. Let's actually have a look at the questions. And the reason we're doing this is by looking at the questions first. If you do need to read through the context afterwards, you are in a position where you can pick out the relevant information. You're not reading the context and going, I still don't know what the question is. Then reading the questions and then having to go back to the context to get the relevant information. You're doing it as streamlined as you possibly can. So let's take a look at the first question. For this reason, please provide a report on options that a business such as Flathall has available to it in developing a new business model. Okay, so we know a bit about Flathall. If you watched the previous videos, we have been talking about the business model. But here, there's a couple of clues, isn't there? We're talking about developing a new business model. So when I read that question, I'm automatically thinking about the E2 syllabus, because that's where the CIMA business model features in the syllabus. And when I think about the new business model, I'm thinking about disruptors. And when I'm thinking about disruptors that have got a successful business model that are having to change, I'm thinking about the incumbent's conundrum. So when a business knows it needs to act, it doesn't necessarily know how to act, okay? So the incumbent's conundrum is really useful in that it lists 5 different ways that business leaders can take in order to adapt a business model. Now, I've not looked at the context yet, and I'm already thinking about the incumbent's conundrum. It's not telling me to think about the incumbent's conundrum. I don't have to use the incumbent's conundrum, but that information is telling me this could be really useful, and I'm thinking about a way I can structure the answer, okay? So just to recap that, because of course we're not in an exam at the moment, and I'm doing this for technique. Obviously, we're not going to complete this in the same time that we would be if we were doing this in an exam. So for this reason, please provide a report on options that a business such as Flathall has available to it in developing a new business model. So without reading the context, I'm thinking, well, I can write a report on applying the incumbent's conundrum and the 5 different ways it lists in adapting a business model to Flathall. Okay, that's without reading any of the context. Okay, Let's move down to the next question. Again, we're not going to read the context yet. Furthermore, so this is for our 6-mark question. So we're spending half the time on this question than we will do on this question. Furthermore, in the pursuit of improved efficiencies, we would also like a breakdown of what makes a high-performance team to reaffirm how the company currently develops its staff and staff options. So what this question is asking is simply a breakdown of what makes a high-performance team. Now, there's loads of different things that make a high-performance team. Again, I'm thinking about my studies. I'm thinking about E2. And what comes to my mind immediately is a little study carried out by Google a few years ago. And they looked at the elements of what made a team really successful. And they listed several characteristics about what makes a good team. So I think I'm just going to write a breakdown. I could use that as my structure. I could talk about the Google and again say what that says, break it down into its different constituent parts and talk about how that makes a high performance team. Okay? Again, I've not looked at the context yet. And then our third question, finally, to further cut costs and maintain an efficient business model, please explain through the use of a cost management model how we can make Flathall more efficient whilst maintaining the quality of our service. So again, it's about going to our studies, thinking about the relevant cost models we could use, and picking one that you feel comfortable writing about and using that as your structure to write. So what immediately comes to my mind is TQM. Again, these are from P2 or BPR. And again, it's not telling me what to write. I'm thinking out of my studies, what I've learnt, and I'm going to apply them to the situation. Okay? So that's using the cost management model. So already, without reading the context, we've got structures for our questions as they are. What we're going to do now is quickly go back and read the context. So right to the top, you're a finance manager at Flathall. As you log into your computer, you find an email from your senior finance manager, Susanna Leong. Now, okay, is any of that so far been relevant to you? Not really, no. Then you've got all the email. Now here you get an idea of what's being talked about, but because we've already gone down to the questions, again, we don't need to know who the email's from. It's just CIMA trying to make the exam as kind of real world as possible. But you are against the clock in an exam, so you need to try and cut out as much as you possibly can. Okay, dear finance manager, due to the range of market forces we are subject to, and we know there are a lot of different market forces from our readings in the pre-scene, and a desire to improve our profitability, the board wishes to consider how Flathall can develop or adapt to a business model that fits current consumer and industry trends. So here, can develop or adapt a business model. Well, that's already in our question. So the bit that we've read that relates to the question, it's already in the question anyway, that fits current consumer and industry trends. The fact that our major competitor, Duvet, has recently announced a major deal with Tech Solutions, a provider of enterprise digital marketing and research solution companies, see attached, is a real concern. Okay, so all this context is relating or setting you up for the first question, really. But again, I think you'll agree, it's not adding a lot of information that we haven't already listed in our kind of setup, in our structure that we got just from reading the questions. But there is some information attached, and it is relevant to the first question. So we're going to go and look at that now. Now, there's often attached info in the case study exam. And you can see here, this one is about the deal between our major competitor, Duvet, and their deal with Tech Solutions. So let's go and see what the deal is about. Duvet has today announced an investment of $96 million Thailand dollars in the enterprise technology provider Tech Solutions as part of a joint venture. Well, that's something that we're going to talk about in our incumbents dilemma or incumbents conundrum that gives both companies access to use each other's products, services, and clients. Tech Solutions is currently one of the fastest growing tech solutions business in Thailand, offering digital marketing and research solutions designed to modernize organizations. A prominent business analyst stated to the press that this represents a bold move by Duvet to modernize its business model and open the door to new innovative market research methods. So you can see here, and you can refer to this when you're writing the exam, that this is what they're doing. This is what they want you to talk about, isn't it? Change your business model. And one way you can do that is how Duvet have already done it. So we know one way to do it is through a joint venture. Markets have responded positively to the news, with share prices seeing a bump to $9.28 upon the resumption of trading this morning as the market opened. At the press conference, Duvet CEO Samuel Rodriguez described the deal as absolutely necessary to ensure the long-term future of Duvet amidst the increasingly challenging industry conditions and changing consumer demands. Well, we know there were challenging industry conditions when we looked at the Porter's Five Forces in the strategic analysis video. And of course, when you're in the industry that Flathall is, then of course there's going to be changing consumer demands from the student demographics. So there we go.
So there we have it. 5 key videos to get you started with your exam preparation. I hope you found them useful, but the reality is that this is just the starting point, and you'll need to do a lot more preparation over the next few weeks to improve your chances of passing this tricky exam. And to that end, we have a number of options available. The video clips you've just seen are taken from our course content. And our courses are designed to help you ultimately pass the exam. We want to minimize your study time. And of course, we want to ensure that you're getting your value for your money. So if you want more of what you saw today, you want to check out our full pre-scene analysis pack. And that basically includes the full videos from which those clips were taken, from the pre-scene analysis videos through to the top 10 analysis, the strategic analysis, industry analysis, and in addition to that, we've also got 30 pre-scene questions that are designed to help you consolidate your knowledge and understanding of the pre-scene company. Pre-scene analysis is a crucial first step, but passing the exam requires developing your exam technique and lots of practice. So the best all-round comprehensive solution is the Astranti Premium course. On that, in addition to everything you get in the pre-scene analysis pack, you'll also get 5 mock exams. And those mock exams are written according to the pre-scene company. They're not generic and they don't have generic solutions. They're applied to the pre-scene and they're based on the top 10 issues. So you'll get questions in the mock exam that they'll have a good chance of coming up in the real exam. In addition to those mock exams, you can get mock marking and feedback. And this is where you'll submit a mock exam to your dedicated marker and they will mark that and give you a fully annotated script with feedback and annotations. And they also provide a 9-page document with feedback that you can apply in your next mock. In addition to that, we've got our exam technique video series. Exam technique is really important in this exam. And so our exam technique video series has 13 chapter study texts and accompanying videos taking you through every aspect of exam technique, right from understanding the exam through to interpreting the requirements, answer planning, writing technique, and time management. Really valuable course that will help you a lot developing those soft skills that you need to do well in this exam. Alongside that, we have 3 live masterclasses that run throughout the course, from the first one that's looking at the pre-scene through to later ones that look more at exam technique and theory revision to help you get ready. Included in the premium, you get access to tutor and mentor support, and you'll be able to access our discussion hub where you can post your questions and talk with other students and tutors about any questions and queries you may have. And our premium course comes with our double pass guarantee, and that's exclusive to premium course students. It's a double guarantee because if you don't pass, if you take this course and you don't pass the exam, we'll give it you again for free with no extra charge. And you also have a 14-day money-back guarantee. So if after 14 days on the course you're not happy, you can get a refund, no questions asked. So whatever your situation, we believe we have the solution for you at Astranti, and you can find out more at astranti.com/CIMA. Thanks for watching.